Hello Tech Time Travelers, and on this video we're going to be waking up my Apple Lisa 2 after a very long slumber, so stick around. Hello Tech Time Travelers, and welcome back to the bus. And today we've got this Apple Lisa 2, which I had a really fun time getting into the bus. The bus is parked really close to my garage and the doors open outward, and yeah, that was a little bit of a Gumby trick. I think I had to actually slide it under the door to get it into position and then kind of weave myself around the door and lift it up. Yeah, it wasn't easy. I think this thing's going to be staying in the bus for a little while. It normally sits beside my desk where it's been for a little over a decade. Anyway, what prompted this video was another video by Adrian Black of Adrian's Digital Basement. He had a viewer donate one of these to him. I know, donate, right? Awesome. And it was just the computer itself, not the keyboard or anything else. And he took it apart because he knew it had some issues and wanted to see how bad those issues were and whether he could potentially fix them. In his case, I don't know, I'm a little doubtful. His machine's pretty bad, but Adrian is very good at fixing stuff, so I would not be surprised if he finds a way to get it functional again. But in watching that video, it brought back memories of this one, which I purchased back in 2013, and I believe I paid, I think it was around $850 or $900 for the whole set. It was not working. It's similar to Adrian's. It had some corrosion issues. There's a battery pack in most Lisas that's attached to the last board that's installed in the back called the I/O board, and those batteries were there to provide a real-time clock. And unfortunately, after 30-40 years, people forget about them and they just start puking their guts all over the boards, and the rust just follows the copper everywhere it can go. And in Adrian's case, it went all the way out to the expansion slots and onto, I think, on other boards. On mine, it wasn't quite that bad, but there was one corner, 2 or 3 by 3 inch square, where it was really bad. It had just eaten right through traces. There was no copper left in spots. And so it took me quite a while to figure it out. It was the first repair I ever did that involved using a soldering iron for its intended purpose. In the past, I'd had soldering irons, but I only used them to repair plastic pieces to melt them back together. And as we'll see when I open up the back here, the inexperience definitely shows. As I remember, there was a bit of a spaghetti going on of jumper wires, and they weren't even proper jumper wires. My wife had given me a Raspberry Pi kit, and it came with a little breadboard thing, and it had those little breadboard plug-in wires with the little steel ends on them. And I had a bugger of a time soldering those, and I didn't know why. Well, anyway, I had a ton of them, and I figured I could use that to fix it. And I spent, I mean, as soon as I got it, which was I think right after Christmas, I went pell-mell for a week, and I just would not give up. And I was just to the point almost where I was about to give up because I thought maybe one of the custom chips, like the COPS chip, had died. And then I discovered a few more broken traces underneath where the battery was, patched those, and it immediately turned on. And that was the most exciting thing ever. Was I had taken this Lisa, which I had bought on the cheap, and fixed it up, and it was working. And that was really exciting because I had the opportunity not just to watch somebody else using one of these things in a video, but to actually sit by myself and just, enjoy it myself and see what it could do and really get a feeling for, what it sounded like and how fast it moved and, how different features of the Lisa OS worked. Anyway, I related all of this in a comment that I made on Adrian's video, and Adrian was curious to see how my bodge repair had held up after a decade plus, because he was debating, is it worth trying to stabilize the rust on these boards and fix them, or does the rust just come back eventually anyway and finish the job? And he said, well, why don't you take out your Lisa and fire it up and see if it's still working and put that in a little video. And I thought, yeah, why not? So that's where we're at right now. I haven't fired this thing up in quite a while, but I'm hoping everything is okay. The only thing I'm nervous about is in the move out here to the bus, it definitely got jostled around a lot, and I don't really trust the repair in there, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm hopeful. This thing is, over the last 10 years, every time I've gone to start it, it started up. So I guess there's some durability to the repair. I guess we'll see, if the rust is potentially getting worse. I did take pictures of it when I first got it, so I'll know, it'll be pretty obvious. Now, I'm not really going to do a documentary historical thing like I normally do with these, because this machine has been covered extensively. This is a very important product for a company that is still with us. It's a company that's worth over $1 trillion. It was their first product to have a graphical user interface. It was the first to have preemptive multitasking. You know, it's just a unique machine. Unfortunately, it was not successful. One of the reasons for that was the original machine had two 5¼ inch floppy drives, which were known as fileware, and which we call the Twiggy drives because that was their code name, which was something to do with a really thin model from years back. If you've ever seen a fileware disk, it looks a lot like a standard floppy disk, but it has an extra cutout on the top. And that's because unlike a standard floppy drive where the heads are all at one end, on the Lisa there's a head at either end, and I think like one's on the bottom and one's on the top. And I think the idea behind it was that it could read and write stuff faster. I think that was the idea. Anyway, it proved to be mechanically a little bit unreliable, and it created headaches for them. Another thing that created headaches for them was the price tag. This thing cost $10,000. They sold somewhere around maybe 4,000 or 5,000 of the original Lisas with the Twiggy drives. Then they decided to go with the 3.5 inch drive, which had just been created by Sony, and it could do 400 kilobytes per disk. That drive is actually the ancestor of all the floppy drives that we used in our PCs later, funny enough. They actually offered some original Lisa owners an upgrade, and I think it was actually free if I'm not mistaken, to take out the Twiggy drives and put in these 3.5 inch floppy drives, and then they just exchanged the bezel so that you had a bezel that fit the thing. And then they released an official new model with this configuration called the Apple Lisa 2. Subsequent to that, they offered a version of the Lisa 2 with a 5 megabyte widget hard drive, which was their own proprietary internal hard drive that they developed. And then there was also a 210, which had a 10 megabyte drive. And that didn't really seem to help matters very much. So they came out with another version that they called the Mac XL. And the Mac XL is essentially a Lisa running a Mac OS-like operating system. I don't think it was actually called Mac OS. I think it was called Mac Works. But it allowed you to run some or substantially all Macintosh software that was available at the time. So that certainly made it a more functional computer, but you know, at the time the Macintosh was right behind this thing in development, and so the question became, you know, why would you spend $10,000 on a Lisa to run it as a Mac when you can buy a Mac for a couple grand? You know, it just makes a little more sense to do it that way. So yeah, sales just never really recovered. This thing became a huge loss. It was a big embarrassment for Steve Jobs. He actually got kicked off the project at one point because he was being Steve Jobs. There was a fellow from a company called Sun Remarketing based out of Logan, Utah, who offered Apple a deal to take some of this unsold inventory off their hands, fix whatever issues there were with it, and then resell it to other people. And Apple agreed to it. And so for a while, Sun Remarketing was selling something they called the Lisa Professional, which was a improved, tweaked, upgraded version of this. And I don't know how many they sold, but they sold enough to make their business pretty worthwhile. And then at some point, Apple just decided that they wanted to memory hole the whole thing. So they just grabbed all of their own inventory, and they went to Sun Remarketing and grabbed whatever inventory they had been given, threw it into some trucks, drove it out to a landfill also in Logan, Utah, and actually had an armed security guard there watching while they ran bulldozers over them and buried them. So yeah, that's a YouTube video I'd really like to see, is somebody being cheeky enough to go to that landfill and dig up whatever they could find, just broken Lisa parts, more than likely. Consequently, today, these machines are pretty darn rare. They're not ultra mega stupid rare, at least not the Apple Lisa 2 version. This is one you can actually hope to own. If you watch eBay very carefully, sometimes a deal will come up. Typically, these ones go for anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 or sometimes up to $10,000, depending on what condition they're in and what stuff they come with. And there's usually one or two or three that show up throughout the year on eBay, sometimes more than that. So they are an expensive acquisition, but if you're a determined collector who needs to have key examples of Apple hardware, then you can definitely do it if you save up a little bit. The original version of the machine though, with the Twiggy drives, good luck. Until fairly recently, they were selling for about $65,000 each, if they were original with the drives installed in the correct front panel. And I kind of feel at that price, it's outside of the fun collecting vintage computers kind of hobby type deal, and it's more like speculative investment in assets. But that's not the high watermark for these. There was one that was part of Paul Allen's estate that just sold recently, and it went for over $880,000. That's Apple I territory. Those are the two most expensive computers you could try to collect. The Apple I, which is consistently in the hundreds of thousands, and the Lisa, which is usually somewhere in the 60s, but in this case was 800, probably because of who it was connected to. Now, is this a machine I would recommend collecting for the general collector out there? I don't know. This is going to sound like gatekeeping, but I really wouldn't recommend it. It's one of those machines where if you have a pretty good Apple computer collection going, you're probably going to want one just to fill out the collection. But they're not really like what I would call a fun computer. I mean, fun is kind of subjective. It depends on what you consider to be fun. You know, I have a wide variety of machines going back to the early 70s, but the ones that I use the most are the ones that I can play games and stuff on. There was one game, I believe, that ran natively on the Lisa OS, and I think that was called Through the Looking Glass, which was a Alice in Wonderland chess mashup of some sort. That was it. You know, it's really cool to fire up one of these things for the first time and mess around with the OS a little bit, but unless you have a hankering to write a novel on a 40-year-old unreliable computer, or make graphs, or just do some weird drawings, it's gonna basically get boring really fast because there's just nothing else to do with it. Unless you switch it over to the MacWorks software and start using it as a Mac, but then why would you have that when you can have a Mac for, you know, $50 or something like that? So if I didn't have this machine and I was facing a $3,000 to $5,000 bill and I'd had the experience of using it somewhere, I'd probably tell myself, don't bother, just get a picture of it. Because it's just too much money to basically sit around. Now that being said, there's a couple of recent developments that are kind of exciting. One is the Lisa OS source code was recently released. I think they released it to CHM. And so now there's at least a potential for developers to create some software that'll run under Lisa OS. That would be amazing. But the second awesome thing is there's a YouTuber named Reese who has his channel Control-Alt-Reese, and he has another one just called Reese, where he does these things he calls Reese Rambles. And he mentioned this fellow who is developing an FPGA version of the Lisa. Now that would be awesome. You could potentially build a whole new Lisa from new parts, you know, maybe something styled to look like the Lisa. Yeah, that could potentially bring in some additional software development as well and make it a more fun computer to use. Anyway, that's enough talking about it. I want to get into this thing and see how my repair job's holding up after all these years, see if it'll run, and yeah, take you for a little tour of this thing. If you've never seen one of these things operate, then this is your opportunity. Anyway, let's get right to, sorry, wrong channel. Let's just open the back panel. All right, let's open up the back here and see how bad things look. Let's forget how to open this thing. Be real careful I don't shake it too hard because I don't want to damage the, oh, I guess there's not that many bodges. There's a few there. Yeah, actually it doesn't look as bad as I remember it. Here, I'll bring the camera a little closer. Yeah, that is the masterwork that I did. You can see the traces there where the solder mask covering on them has been stripped off so that I could try to repair them. You can see my amazing work with the breadboard jumpers, which really are not ideal for this kind of work, but somehow I made it work. You can also see where I just basically applied a massive lump of solder. This area under the battery was the last place that gave me trouble before I finally got the thing to work. I disconnected the battery and cut it off and cut all the leads to it, but I didn't think to actually pull it off the board. So I spent many a frustrating day trying to figure out what was still wrong, and then I finally realized that there were traces underneath it, and of course they were absolutely savaged. So Yeah, you can see this is pretty darn ugly. That being said, in 10 years, I don't think it's gotten a lot worse than when I first worked on it. It looks pretty much like it did when I first hacked it back together. And that was one of the things that Adrian was asking me about because he was debating, you know, should I really try to repair this? If I do, is it worthwhile? Because it might just, you know, further degrade over time and stop working again. But yeah, that's what it looks like today in 2025, folks. And I am just praying it still works. I mean, with the experience I have now, I would love to go in there and undo that freaking mess. But I am afraid that I would not be able to replicate the repair. And if this thing is still, in fact, working, which I strongly suspect it is, I really don't want to pull that tiger's tail. You know what I'm saying? Let's just see the slots over here. On Adrian's, he had a ton of corrosion on his. On mine, there's a little bit. I could probably stand to apply a little bit of deoxit to mine. I'm never going to plug anything in those, but who knows? I don't think they've gotten any worse in 10 years, so yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is slowly getting worse over time, but that's what it looks like right now. So let's fire it up and see what kind of mood it's in. Okay, so now for the moment of truth, we're going to fire this thing up and hopefully it doesn't go on fire. Right now, I've got it plugged in. I can see that the power light is off. That's usually a good sign that everything's working with the logic board. So now what I'm going to do is turn on the profile hard drive. These take a very, very long time to warm up. I think it's in excess of like 30 seconds. So we'll just start her up and I'm going to make you sit through that whole sequence because it's part of the experience. And here we go. So you basically have to wait until that ready light comes on. Getting there. Any day now. Okay, we're ready. Good. So that means hopefully it's gonna work. 2, 1. And we got a light. I heard a click. Come on, baby. Let's see. Oh, there it is. There it is. Unbelievable. Unfreaking believable that my first ever repair job actually fixed this. That's nuts. And it still works today, 10 years later. And there we have it. She's booting the Lisa Office system, release 3.1. It's interesting how it doesn't have like any Apple logos or anything, like macOS does. The profile is running over a parallel connection, which can't be very fast. I don't know how much faster this would be if it was on the Twiggy drives. From my understanding with the Twiggy drives is they were designed in a way that they read floppy disks fairly quickly, quicker than the 3.5 inch here. But I don't know how much more quickly, and I don't know how much more quickly an internal widget drive would be versus the profile. So yeah, I'd love to hear from any Lisa owners if there's any major difference between those. So there's preferences. It's pretty sparse. Set conveniences. Yeah, I can mess around with the brightness, dim level. Whoa, that went dark. Okay, never mind. Let's just put that back. I'm not sure what happened there. Yeah, I guess, oh, I see what's going on. Yeah, so if I put it up here, that's what it would dim to. Just the usual stuff. Now let's go into calculator here, because that's an important thing. Calculator. Calculate the amount of time it takes to load calculator using a profile hard drive on a Lisa 2. That was about 20 seconds. Not very fast. 9, I don't know, plus 9 equals, oops. And I just closed it. Okay, that's dumb. How do I get back there? Okay, let's just set aside everything. Yeah, the main apps I think the OS came with were Lisa Calc, Lisa Write, Lisa List, Lisa Graph, Lisa Draw. Of course, we'll check out Lisa Draw. I mean, is this not amazing or what? Like, amateur repair, you saw what I did back there, and somehow it's working. I don't know how much longer that repair is going to last. That's kind of the big question, because it's really not a great repair, but 10 years, that's pretty good. If I can shore it up for another 20 or 30, then I don't need to worry about it. It'll be somebody else's problem. This tool is used to create and edit documents. To use the tool, tear off a piece of Lisa Draw stationery and open it. Okay. And I've already forgotten how to do that. You can hear the drive getting kind of loud. I don't know how to do this. Well, that's embarrassing. Some Lisa tour this is. How the frig do you tear off a piece of paper? That would have been really good if they'd put some instructions in there. Set aside everything, attributes, edit, housekeeping, desk. That's it, I'm cheating. You tear off a piece of paper, Apple Lisa. Here we go. From a stationary pad icon on the desktop to create, okay, so every one of these should have, select the pad icon. Ah, okay, that's what I was missing. Okay, close that. In a hurry, because this drive is sounding worse and worse by the second. Okay, let's just set aside that. I just want a new frickin' piece of paper, that's all. Okay, so that is the piece of paper I was messing around with. I'm just gonna group these over here. Let's just put all this stuff here. So these are papers that I've already torn off. Lisa Terminal paper, Lisa List paper, Lisa Graph paper, Lisa Write paper. I don't see Lisa Draw paper though, where's that? Okay. Or maybe this just got accidentally renamed. Nope, there's no tear off stationery there. Ah, but there is tear off stationery on this one. I just don't know where the Lisa Draw one is. Okay, so you all saw how that worked. So if I do Lisa Graph, file, tear off stationery. Okay, there we go. And I think I can rename this. There's no arrow keys. That's interesting. I never noticed that before. There's no arrow keys at all on the keyboard. And then if I open it up, yeah, there's Lisa Graph. I've seen that already. Hey, there's the Apple symbol. First time I've noticed it. And there we go, there's our graph. Look at this graph! Yep. Let's just save and put away. So there is a distinction between saving things and putting them away. I don't know what happens to a file if I just shut the machine down. So that's Lisa Calc. This is Lisa Terminal. I don't know why you would tear off stationery from a terminal. Yeah, that's kind of weird. I don't know why you would... I'm sure there's a logic to it, but I don't know why you would have a paper that you tear off to use a terminal. That doesn't make any sense to me. Let's see what date this thing thinks it is. I'm thinking it must be appending the date to all the file names. There's the clock. No, it thinks it's 1980, January 1st. So I don't know where that 1022 comes from. If anybody out there knows, let me know. There's a wastebasket, clipboard. Got anything on the clipboard? So we've seen Lisa write, calc, Lisa list. It's just draw. I can't figure out how to... Well, there's a draw paper over here that's already there. Can I tear off? Nope. Make stationery pad. Oh, that's interesting. Can I do that with this? Nope. Okay. Off stationery. Yeah, it's not exactly the most... I get what they were going for. There was a certain logic, right? If you were in an office in the early 1980s and you had something to write, you might tear off a piece of paper from a pad, although if you were typing something, presumably it would be paper in a stack and you would just grab from the stack and put it in your typewriter, which wouldn't involve tearing at all. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna have to look up what those date codes mean. And I think this piece of paper has been used before, but just so you get a little bit of a flavor here. I love the way it just like blinks as it's being set up. That's cool. Not many colors though. Let's see if we can fill it. Yeah, it's all cross-hatching. There we go. Color. Yellow. Well, how in earth is that yellow? How the hell is that yellow? Oh, maybe, I don't know. I guess if you were printing on a plotter, then it would have that information, maybe? I don't know. What's this guy? La la la. Oops. Yeah, it gets a little lost after you wiggle it around too much. Okay. We'll put in some text. This Lisa is slow. Okay, let's get out of here. Just save and put it away, please. Now, I'm not sure if this is currently operating in square pixel mode. I've never been 100% clear about the difference. But I mean, it is working, so I mean, it looks nice and clear. I know if it's not in the square pixel mode, it's a slightly lower resolution, I think. But yeah, this looks great, whatever it is. Okay, so that's my little tour of the Lisa. I'm sorry it's not like super in-depth, but there's other videos out there, like I said, that have shown all this and can explain a lot of it better than I can. But you know, I'm just glad to see it's working, right? It's functional, very noisy, it's kind of annoying. So I guess the last thing we're going to do here is shut her down. How do we do that? Because there's no file shutdown command. That much I know. Well, the way you do that is by pressing the button, which is right there. And we're going to hit it. And I'm being very careful not to tap the bezel too much because there is a switch in here that kills the power if it detects that this is off or open. And unfortunately on mine, the bezel kind of hangs a little bit loose. So if you bang it too hard, it will let the switch go and then the whole thing just shuts right off. And it doesn't really like that when that happens. We're coming up on the, what is it, 2 minutes now, and it's still not shutting down. Oh, there it goes, dim dim. Okay, and that's the click that tells us that she's off. Now I can switch the hard drive off. Okay, and now I can unplug them. Anyway, that's it for this video, and now I'd like to turn things over to Spaced Squirrel, who is down at a landfill, I believe, somewhere near Logan, Utah, and he is doing a little archaeology dig. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Space Squirrel here. Just looking for Lisa's in a non-disclosed location or something. If you've enjoyed, whatever this is, like and subscribe, maybe? Nuts. Ow. Space Squirrel out.